Are we good?
Yes, we are.
Hello, this is GR and Anna today, and we're going to give you a fairly short educational moment today. And we're entitling this Tax Considerations When You Sell Your Home. In recent months, I've had two different realtors come to me and say, one said, I'm getting ready to sell my own home, want to know what I have to pay taxes on, and I hear there's exclusions. Another newer realtor was going to go do a listing presentation and says, I know they're going to ask me if they make this much money off the house, what are they going to have to pay taxes? So I've got hit up with that twice. So I thought today that I would take a moment and teach us all or remind us all of what taxes you have to pay when you sell your own home or your client sells their own home. And we'll do that in three ways today. I'm going to read the IRS code about this exclusion. What does Pat always say, Anna? I don't want to be the source. I want to be the source of the source.
Correct.
So I'm not the CPA today, but I can read this to you and it's really clear. So IRS code number 2, I have 2 examples that I want to use to enforce the IRS code. And 3, I'm going to pretend like I'm Pat and give you a script of how to say this about the $500,000 up to exclusion in this high interest rate environment. Might help us say this a little better. So with that said, I'm going to switch to reading you the code. First thing is I'm going to give you the rules for the exclusions, and then we'll talk about the dollar amounts of the exclusions. And this says, to claim the exclusion, the taxpayer must meet ownership and use test. Essentially, you have to own your house 2 years of the previous 5 from the day of closing, and it has to be your primary use. So if you owned it 2 years in a row and it was your primary and you owned it the day before closing, you get all of these exclusions. There is another section I won't go into, but you had to be 2 out of 5 years and you could break it up, but still had to own it for 2 years. So if you own your home for 2 years and you made money off of it and it was your main residence, you now have capital gains that are due the government. But there is a huge exclusion, and here's the rules. Taxpayers who sell their main home for a capital gain may be able to exclude up to $250,000 of that gain from their income. Taxpayers who file a joint return with their spouse may be able to exclude up to $500,000. So again, the 2 rules is you had to be in it 2 years or more, and it had to be your primary residence for those 2 years. And if you are filing single, you can exclude $250,000. If you file jointly, you can exclude $500,000. I bought a house once in Pennsylvania and I paid $500 for it. 3 years later, it gone up so much, I sold it for $945. I made $450,000 in 3 years off a house and paid no taxes. And I'll use it to buy the next house, but that's the way this works. There's one sidebar here I want to read, and I don't think this will surprise anyone. If you make money on your house, you have to pay capital gains, especially if it's over $500,000, right? But if you have a loss, some taxpayers experience a loss when their main home sells for less than what they paid for. This is not tax deductible. So I get that question too. Sounds like the government. If you make money, you got to pay taxes. If you lose money, so what? You don't get to write that off. Okay, here's 2 examples I want to give you today, and I'm going to use easy numbers. We bought, example number 1, bought a $1 million house. Filed a joint return. It was their main resident, lived in it for 2 years, and sold it for $1.5 million. So their cost basis is $1 million. They sold it for 1.5. Their joint So they get a $500,000 exclusion. On one sheet on your income taxes, you put what you paid for it, you put what you sold it, the capital gains will show up in that example as 500, and then you have a $500,000 exclusion. You have no taxes to pay. Example 2 is you bought $1 million house. You sold it for $1.6 million. But during the 2 years you and your spouse owned this as your main residence, you spent $100,000 fixing up the basement, putting a bathroom, pool room, whatever you did. So now on that one-page tax form, you paid $1 million. You had another $100,000 of improvements. Your cost basis is now 1.1. And you sold it for 1.6, so you made $500,000. And then you get a $500,000 exclusion because you're joint, and now you only owe taxes on 0. So that's as simple a nutshell as you can get. Again, always use the I'm not the source, I'm the source of the source. Make sure they talk to their accountant. Well, actually, I want to give you an example in a quick story. Well, before that, I know a realtor who lived in Old Trail when it first opened, and she built a house, lived in it 2 years, sold it, got it, no taxes she had to pay, bought the next one. And she now lives in one of the largest homes in Old Trails, and she's done that 3 or 4 times. And that really, really works. If you're in a place like that from the beginning, that's appreciated rapidly. So, but today I get this question from all of us realtors today. Interest rates are 7%. Gosh, it's harder to sell houses, and nobody's going to argue with that. But what you can say, as Pat would do in a script, I understand that 7% interest is higher than we'd like to pay, but isn't it nice that you have this example, $500,000 worth of tax exempt capital gains that you can use for the new one. So it's not as quite a big a bite as just 7%. So I think that's an important one to help us counteract the interest rate. You make those words your own. And lastly, I was reading one of my newsletter today. You know who Barbara Conkran is, the Shark Tank lady who made billions of dollars in real estate, mainly around New York. She came on today and said, no, this sounds awful. We're all scared of 7% rates. There's a lot of people going to the sidelines. She goes, but in the next 10 years, this is the best time to buy real estate. And here's why. The people on the sidelines are sitting around with 7% interest rate, not wanting to jump in. And interest rate, she said, will probably in our lifetime never go back to 2.5%. That was her opinion. She said, but it's not all that far. They're going to be back in the 5s. She said, the instant we see 5 point anything, interest, the sellers will come off the sideline, and prices are going to go a 10% increase in very short order. And if they get to the low 5s, we're going to see 15%. That's her prediction. And if you had that $1 million house and it went up 15%, there's $150,000 you're going to wish you bought it now. So that's another script, maybe. So I just thought I would share that with you. If you have any questions about this, always feel free to reach out to me. And I hope you have a blessed day. Thanks, Anna, for coordinating all this.
Sure. Thank you.